For almost 2 millennia, we've been told a simple story. The Tower of Babel is a biblical myth, a fable about human arrogance and the origin of languages. But here's the problem. Virtually everything you've learned about Babel isn't based on solid facts. It's based on a purely allegorical interpretation of sacred texts, ignoring their neighbors. What if the real story isn't just incomplete, but deliberately hidden beneath the sands of a rock?
At the heart of this mystery lies the dogmatic consensus, the guardians of secular interpretation. For decades, the consensus alone has controlled the narrative that ancient texts are just myths with no factual basis. There is no evidence of a single mother tongue or a divine confusion event. It is folklore. But this is where it gets strange. If you've ever wondered if there's more to the story of the origin of languages than meets the eye, trust me, you'll want to keep watching. Today we dive deep into the physical evidence of the Tower in Babylon hidden in plain sight, the forgotten Sumerian text that predates the Bible and tells the same story, what modern science reveals about an ancestral mother tongue. The answers might change everything you think you know about human history. Consider this surprising fact. Although Babel is a pillar of Western history, we've been told there is no clear archaeological proof of its existence. The scribes of Babylon, however, recorded everything meticulously. And strangely, they left behind detailed descriptions of a colossal monument that matches perfectly. The tablet describes a ziggurat called Etemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Nebuchadnezzar II himself boasts of having rebuilt it so that its top might rival the heavens, a phrase almost identical to Genesis. Excavations by Robert Caldwell in the early 20th century found its foundation, a massive base of 91 meters by 91 meters. This stunning archaeological presence, ignored by the popular narrative, raises a significant question. Could Babel have been the Hebrew name for the real Babylonian structure of Etemenanki? An even greater mystery is the surprising precision of the parallel narrative. The Genesis story did not emerge from a vacuum. Linguists and Sumerologists still marvel at how a Sumerian story, millennia older, mirrors Genesis 11. The eminent researcher Samuel Noah Kramer, one of the world's greatest Sumerologists, spent his life studying the epic Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta. He noted a stunning technical detail. The text describes a past time when the whole universe, the people in unison, spoke to Enlil in a single tongue. Attempts by modern researchers to dismiss this as mere coincidence have failed drastically. Their explanations do not justify why the poem then explicitly describes the god Enki changing the speech in their mouths and placing discord in it. This raises an important question. If the story of Babel is just a Hebrew myth, why did the Sumerians write the same story 1,000 years earlier? In 1994, the linguist Merritt Ruhlen from Stanford University made waves by publishing scientific evidence that seemed to validate the myth. Using large-scale comparative linguistic analysis, he, following his mentor Joseph Greenberg, discovered universal word roots that survive in all the planet's language families, from African to Native American languages. Nicknamed the Proto-Language hypothesis, or proto-world, this strange discovery shocked the academic world. And this is why it matters. It scientifically suggests that the single language of Babel was not a myth, but a historical reality, a mother tongue from which all others evolved. But as soon as Ruhlen presented his evidence, the traditional linguistic academy suddenly launched a coordinated attack to discredit his investigation. His research was publicly labeled pseudo-linguistics and voodoo in prestigious publications, considered bad science. Funding for mother tongue, proto-world studies was drastically cut, deemed a fruitless pursuit and a waste of time. To this day, the proto-language hypothesis remains taboo in the mainstream. Despite repeated requests, interdisciplinary investigation continues to be denied. What lies behind this persistent caution? All these strange discoveries, a real building, an identical pre-biblical text, and suggestive scientific data suggest something remarkable. Perhaps the ancient Hebrews and Sumerians had access to real historical knowledge of an event that fragmented humanity. Or perhaps they inherited knowledge from a pre-Diluvian civilization that witnessed it all. However, despite these intriguing possibilities, the historical establishment maintains a cautious, even defensive approach. One force stands firmly between us and the answers: the dogma of academic skepticism, the guardian of the secular narrative, whose decisions have shaped not only what the public knows about our linguistic origins, but more importantly, what we don't. For decades, this consensus has dominated archaeology and historical linguistics. Characteristics. It operates under the pretext of scientific rigor, but often displays a fundamental bias against any evidence that seems to validate ancient texts. These roles have given this dogma unparalleled control over funding for excavations in Iraq and the Middle East, the publication of peer-reviewed journal articles, the narrative taught in universities, the labeling of alternative researchers as charlatans or creationists. But behind the passionate promotion of the skeptical method lies a much darker reality, a rigid system that has consistently blocked researchers attempting to challenge established narratives. Case 1. Kramer's discovery of the confusion of tongues in Enmerkar was largely ignored by linguistics for 30 years. Case 2. The work on proto-language was dismissed without counter-analysis, labeled voodoo and pseudoscience. Case 3. Attempts to date the foundations of Etemenanki to earlier periods were denied access to the site. This leaves us with a disturbing question. Is the academic consensus genuinely protecting scientific integrity or guarding something else? Secrets that could rewrite human history entirely? The remarkable cataclysm memory theory from researcher Dr. Aris Vlachos. Vlachos noticed something extraordinary. The story of Babel isn't about building a tower, but about human dispersal after a traumatic event. Logic. The tower, or Etemenanki, was an astronomical observatory,
The confusion wasn't divine, but the social collapse. This is likely not just a coincidence. Many ancient cultures have myths of gods destroying humanity. If Vlachos's theory is true, it could mean that Babel is the historical record of the Younger Dryas event.
The controversial inherited knowledge hypothesis from translator Anton Parks. Parks noticed something extraordinary: the extreme similarity between the story of Babel and the Sumerian myths of the Anunnaki confusing humanity.
Logic. Parks suggests that the Sumerian texts describe a war of the gods, where one faction, led by Enki, deliberately programmed different languages into humanity to divide and control it after it had become arrogant.
This fits the recurring theme of gods fearing human potential. If Parks's theory is true, it could mean that linguistic diversity is not natural evolution, but an ancient technological intervention. Although mainstream archaeology dismisses these theories, the growing evidence makes them increasingly difficult to ignore.
After looking closely at everything we've explored, the physical foundation of Etemenanki, the pre-biblical Sumerian text and Merkah, the systematic blocking of Proto-Language research, the theories of cataclysm and intervention, we are left questioning the official version of history we've always been taught. These fascinating discoveries suggest that the Sumerians and Hebrews likely had far more advanced knowledge about human prehistory than archaeology gives them credit for. But if these ideas are so intriguing, why does dominant linguistics still hesitate to fully explore them? One reason is that accepting the theory of intervention or cataclysm could mean drastically changing the history we currently accept. Academic and religious institutions have built their identities and reputations around the traditional timeline of human and cultural evolution. By resisting a deeper exploration of the Enmarkar texts and linguistic genetics, the dominant field may be keeping fundamental truths hidden. Imagine if we found clear evidence that language was in fact given or fragmented in a single moment. Such a discovery wouldn't just change our view of Babel, it could alter our entire understanding of what it means to be human. On the brink of these profound mysteries, we must ask, will academic authorities finally reopen the Sumerian archives with new eyes and without prejudice? Or will the secrets of Babel remain locked away, waiting for future generations brave enough to seek the truth?